I noticed the orange markings early one Saturday morning. They ran straight through the side yard I had owned for years. At first, I assumed the utility company had made a mistake. Then I saw my neighbor standing beside them with construction plans. Mark told me the markings were for his new construction access route. He said the concrete trucks would simply drive across my property. I asked him who had given him permission. His answer was the first warning sign. Mark insisted the route would only be temporary. He said the trucks needed a straight path to his construction site. I reminded him that temporary access still required permission. He just smiled and told me the trucks were already scheduled. I went inside and pulled out my property survey. The boundary was unmistakable. The entire marked route was inside my property line. That was when I realized this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. I walked the boundary and checked every marker. There was no ambiguity about where my land ended. Mark's construction route crossed directly through my side yard. I told him clearly that he did not have permission to use it. Mark's attitude changed the moment I refused. He said everyone in the neighborhood understood the route was necessary. I told him neighborhood convenience didn't change property boundaries. He warned me that stopping the project would cost him money. A few minutes later, the first concrete truck arrived. The driver followed Mark's directions toward my side yard. I stood beside my property boundary and calmly showed him the notice. The driver stopped before crossing onto my land. The driver checked the property boundary and shook his head. He wasn't willing to drive onto private property without authorization. Mark argued with him for several minutes. Then the truck slowly backed away and turned around. Then a second concrete truck showed up. Mark tried the same explanation with the new driver, but the driver checked the boundary too. Once again, the truck refused to enter my property. By noon, every concrete truck had turned around. Nobody wanted to cross private property without proper authorization. Mark's shortcut had disappeared, but my side yard was untouched. And that was when he realized the construction problem had only just begun. Mark wasn't ready to give up on his shortcut. Instead, he called the HOA and complained that I was delaying his project. He claimed the side yard should be available for construction access, but he still couldn't produce anything proving he had permission. About 20 minutes later, an HOA representative showed up. She carried a clipboard and seemed confident that she knew the situation. Mark immediately started explaining his version of events. Then she asked me to show her where my property boundary actually ran. I handed her the property survey and pointed to the boundary. The orange construction route was clearly inside my property. She compared the survey with the physical markers. For the first time, Mark stopped talking. The HOA representative pulled up the association records. She checked the neighborhood plans and the recorded property information. There was no HOA document granting Mark access across my yard. The shortcut he had planned wasn't actually his to use. Mark tried another argument. He said the project couldn't continue without access through my side yard. I told him that was a construction planning problem, not a property rights problem. The HOA representative didn't disagree. Even construction supervisor finally stepped in. He explained that his drivers couldn't use private property without authorization. They needed a lawful route for the deliveries. Mark's shortcut was officially off the table. The crew finally drew up another access plan. It wasn't as convenient for Mark, but it stayed on the proper route. The construction could continue without crossing my land, and my side yard would remain exactly where it belonged. By late afternoon, the orange markings were being removed. The stakes came out one by one. The grass was finally returning to normal. Mark had no choice but to accept the boundary he should have respected from the beginning. The next morning, the trucks finally started moving again. They followed the proper public route, instead of cutting through my yard. The project continued, just without the shortcut Mark had assumed he owned. And I never had to raise my voice once. In the end, nobody stopped Mark's construction project. We simply made sure it happened without crossing someone else's property. My side yard stayed untouched, and the boundary stayed respected. Sometimes the strongest response isn't fighting back. It's simply knowing what you own